Welcome to video 1 for chapter 10, part 2, muscles. So in this chapter, we are going to be talking about muscle physiology and how the muscles work together more on a larger scale than we did last chapter when we talked about how an individual muscle contracts. So now we're going to look at whole muscle groups, the different types of movement, how the muscle coordinates, etc. So we're going to start off this video with just a little bit of general information. So the first thing that we'll say is a single nerve impulse. So an action potential, one action potential in a motor neuron elicits a single muscle action potential in all of the muscle fibers it innervates. So it's a one-to-one response. One action potential in a motor neuron, one action potential in a muscle, but that one motor neuron could go to a lot of different muscle fibers, and usually it's one whole muscle or a muscle group. Each skeletal muscle fiber has one neuromuscular junction, but the axon of one motor neuron can branch to many muscle fibers. So one axon of a motor neuron can branch to a lot of different muscle fibers, but each muscle fiber, which we know is a cell, has one neuromuscular junction that covers that muscle cell and all the myofibrils that are inside. So it is a coordinated response. Contraction of a whole muscle depends on the number of fibers contracting in unison. So the whole muscle, we could have almost all of them contracting in unison, or only a couple could be stimulated, which means the whole muscle really does not contract much at all. So depending on how much we have to contract to do a particular job, we might not have to activate the entire muscle to give us maximum contraction. The total tension that a single muscle fiber can produce depends on the rate at which nerve impulses or action potentials arrive at the synapse. So if you remember, frequency of stimulation is equal to the number of impulses per second. So we can sustain contraction of a muscle, but that is related to how fast we can get the action potentials there, because a single nerve impulse elicits a single muscle action potential, and that just has to be continually that those impulses have to continually flow in order to maintain tension and contraction of that muscle. And we know that the frequency is related to how fast or how many impulses per second, which is regulated by the absolute refractory period. So there is a maximum tension that can be elicited in a muscle based on the nerve impulses that are attending. So it can only contract at a certain tension based on that. So the other thing that we're going to talk about is a motor unit. A motor unit, let me try that again. A motor unit is one motor neuron plus all of the muscle fibers it stimulates. So if we look at certain nerve or motor neurons that are going to a muscle, if it goes to one muscle, it's that motor neuron and that muscle that it innervates. Now, the muscles vary in size, so motor units also vary in size. But within this motor unit, all fibers in the motor unit contract in unison. And that is so the muscle can function as a unit. Even though the individual muscle fibers, the myofibrils down to the sarcomeres, are each contracting, but they do it in unison, so we end up with a coordinated movement. And as you can imagine, more precise movement, we have a smaller number of fibers per motor unit. So muscles like the muscles in your eye are very, very small, but we have one dedicated nerve that goes to that muscle because it requires precision movement. Unrelated or related to that, if we think about our back muscles, they don't need very much precision in movement because they're such a big muscle. So we have a lot of motor fibers in those big muscles. So another example, if we look at two muscles, we have the gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius is one of our calf muscles. It's the more superficial calf muscle from the back of the knee down to the Achilles tendon. There are about 2,000 to 3,000 fibers per unit of this muscle. But if we look at the muscles that control the larynx, which are some of your vocal cord muscles, we have 10 to 20 fibers per unit. And of course, the larger the number of units or fibers per unit, the larger the force or strength of the muscle. Because we have to recruit more fibers in a unit with strength, and the contraction increases. So the gastrocnemius, which helps us walk, helps us stand up, well, that's a lot bigger than moving your little vocal cord to produce sound. But because that requires precision movement, we have fewer fibers per unit.